Yes,
slides.
we will get you the clicker. We will get you the clicker as well, so that you are comfortable to do your session. Right, 1 second. I'll just get this. Yeah, this is checked. Great. Yes, this is your clicker.
Thank you very much.
Sorry for not giving the proper introduction to Mr. Calum Chace, but he is a very famous author and futurist, the author of this very interesting book called Surviving AI. Interesting that now you are going to be talking to us about that after the whole day that we've been speaking about that. So without further ado, over to you, Mr. Chace.
Namaste. Poor old Gert. I hope he's getting better. What would you say if I said that on that stand, I've got a big red button? And if I press that big red button, then you and all of your families and the whole of humanity will live for as long as you like, in perfect health, and with the cognitive and physical abilities of a minor deity. Not Lord Shiva, but say Hanuman. Would you be interested in that? I expect you probably would. But, of course, there's a catch. The catch is that if I press that big red button, then there's a chance that the entire human race will go extinct. Gone. So, let's have a show of hands. How many of you would like me to press that big red button? Good on you. 2. All right. How many? Oh, 3. How many of you would prefer I didn't press that big red button? Most of you. And the rest, presumably, you don't care. Okay. Okay. Well, that's interesting and perhaps a bit unfortunate because I'm afraid humanity has got its finger on that button and we're not going to take it off. So, the title of my talk is Can Digital Ability Surpass Human Intelligence? And I think the answer is unquestionably yes. I'm going to spend the rest of this 30 minutes or so explaining why I think that and what the implications are. The digital ability that I'm referring to, obviously, is artificial intelligence. So let's just get clear about what that is before we start. Artificial intelligence is 2 words. The first word, artificial, is very easy to define. It simply means something created by humans, or possibly by aliens, but not by God or by evolution. Intelligence has more different definitions, but my favorite is just 4 words. Goal-oriented adaptive behavior. So it doesn't mention humans. Intelligence is not something that is restricted to humans. Many animals have intelligence. Machines now have intelligence. But an AI is something which pursues a goal and learns as it's pursuing that goal and adapts its behavior accordingly. And the science of artificial intelligence got started in 1956 in Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, one of America's Ivy League schools, Ivy League universities. And the delegates to that conference were very ambitious. They thought that within a year, they could replicate all the functions of a human brain. It was a nice idea. Not for the last time, they were rather over-optimistic. Right from the start, there were 2 types of artificial intelligence. One type was to replicate the behavior in a simplified way of the human brain, of human neurons. And it was called artificial neural networks. And the first ones were called perceptrons, and this is what they looked like. But in 1969, a book was published which seemed to prove mathematically that these could not work. And so the other form of AI took precedence, which was known as good old-fashioned AI, or symbolic AI, in which researchers try to translate every kind of human thought, every kind of human communication into computer code. And that also didn't work terribly well, and so there were a couple of AI winters during which researchers just couldn't get any money for their work. Towards the end of the last century and the beginning of this century, AI did do some quite impressive things. Particularly in 1996, a system called Deep Blue, built by IBM, beat the world's best ever human chess player, which wasn't bad. Garry Kasparov, that chess player, accused them of cheating, and he was probably right, but he got over that. All this change, though, all this relative failure, all this failure to make money, which was the critical thing, it all changed in 2012 when there was a big bang in AI. And in 2012, a researcher called Geoff Hinton, known as the godfather of deep learning, he got artificial neural networks to work effectively using an algorithm called backpropagation. And he and some others rebranded artificial neural networks as deep learning. Now, there were three things which enabled Hinton to do that. The first was a process known as Moore's law, named after a man called Gordon Moore, who very sadly died last week, rest in peace. Gordon Moore was working at Fairchild Semiconductors when he noticed that that company was putting twice as many transistors on each chip it made every year, he thought at the time. Now, Moore's law has evolved over the time. It went from 1 year to 2 years, back to 1.5. Clock speed was added, and various other changes have happened. But what it means is that machines get twice as powerful, or half as expensive, whichever way you look at it, every 18 months. And that's been going on ever since 1965, when he first noticed it. The second change which enabled Hinton to achieve the Big Bang in AI in 2012 was the availability of enormous data sets of labeled images. And a woman called Fei-Fei Li is the unsung hero here. She created ImageNet, and an enormous amount of effort went into labeling millions and millions of pictures. And of course, most of them are cats. And then the third thing which enabled Hinton to create the Big Bang was the availability of GPUs. These are a type of transistor which is very well suited for deep learning. It was originally developed for video games, and they replaced CPUs in AI systems. And since the Big Bang in 2012, AI has made money. In fact, it's made lots of money. It's enabled Google and Facebook and some other firms to create the biggest companies in the world. And Google and Facebook in particular have done this by essentially taking advertising money away from Rupert Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch doesn't like that very much, and so there's been a techlash against the tech giants. Personally, I think it's a very good idea to take money away from Rupert Murdoch. I think we should do it more. Probably the pinnacle of public awareness of AI, thanks to deep learning, was when a system created by a company called DeepMind, which is based in London but owned by Google, they created a system called AlphaGo, and that beat the world's best Go player. Go is a much harder game to win with a computer than chess. So that was in 2016, but since 2016, the world got a bit bored with AI. We got distracted by other things. But as the introducer said, at the end of 2022, the world started to pay attention. Firstly, there were things called generative AI systems which showed an amazing ability to create photorealistic images based on just a prompt, just a sentence or two from a human, like this one. And then in November, a system called ChatGPT was released. 30th of November, and as our friend said, within 4 or 5 days it had 1 million subscribers, 1 million users, and by mid-December it had 100 million users, which is the fastest uptake of any app, any tech in the history of tech. And then, 2 weeks ago, on the 14th of March, GPT-4 was released. Now, ChatGPT isn't the best large language model, or foundation model as they're called in the world, but it was just the one that the public was first able to play with. The public hadn't been able to play with anything quite so good before. So that really woke the world up. But GPT-4, released 2 weeks ago, is a real game changer. This is a very, very powerful system. It's very impressive. Can I just ask, how many of you in this room have had the opportunity to play with GPT-4? Put your hand up if you have played with GPT-4. That's excellent. So somewhere between a third and a half. That's great. That's really good. GPT-4 not only passes the bar exam in America, it comes in the top 10%. GPT-3 passed but only came in the bottom 10%. It is qualitatively different. And the reason why it's been possible to launch this system is that in 2017, there was a second Big Bang. So the first Big Bang was in 2012, Jeff Hinton. The second Big Bang was 2017, when some researchers at Google published a paper called Attention is All You Need. And in their lovely geeky way, they were riffing, obviously, on the famous Beatles song. ChatGPT and GPT-4, the GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformers. So they're relying on transformer technology, which fortunately has nothing at all to do with these guys. Now, what transformers do, what transformer AI systems do, is in principle very simple. They are trained on enormous data sets, much bigger than the deep learning system, because the trick is they don't have to be labeled. These data systems don't have to be labeled. So GPT-4 was given the whole of Wikipedia and millions of out-of-copyright books and many other data sources. And what it does is it predicts the next token in a series. A token can be a word, or a part of a word, or a piece of code, or a bit of an image. What they do is they look back into their corpus of data that they've got to be trained on, and they play peekaboo with themselves. They mask a token and try to figure out what that token ought to be according to all the context, all the words around it, backwards and forwards. And then they reveal the token to themselves, and if they got it right, great, they give themselves a pat on the back. If they don't, then they adjust the model so they get it right next time. Now, before I go on to talk about the likely impacts of GPT on the workplace and on society, Anand asked me to talk a little bit about the place of India in the AI industry and make some general remarks about that. You'll notice that the country I've talked about is the USA. And that's because almost all, well, most of, cutting-edge AI is developed by these 6 tech giants. It's almost all developed in America. To these 6 giants, we ought to add DeepMind, which is an AGI lab based in London, but owned by Google, I mentioned before, and OpenAI. OpenAI based in San Francisco, founded by Elon Musk and Sam Altman, and that is now heavily invested in by Microsoft. In addition to America, China is a big player in cutting-edge AI. China has its own tech giants. Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent are their analogies to Google, Facebook, and Amazon. But also in China, the Chinese government is a major investor in AI, which is not true in the States. So you've got America, and you've got China, and that's everybody else. This is a chart showing all of the tech giants in Europe, all the wonderful tech giants in Europe. And I'm sorry to say this, but all the wonderful tech giants in India too. And in the rest of Asia, and in Africa, and in South America. There are none. And I think this is a bit of a problem. I mean, I might be old-fashioned, but I don't think it's a great idea for humanity's most powerful technology to be a duopoly of China and the US. No disrespect to either China or the US, but I think the rest of the world should be playing too. There are rankings drawn up of where different countries sit in the AI industry. And I know that India is incredibly wired and very digital, and that's great. But it's about number 17 or 18 in the world in AI rankings in terms of its production of AI systems. But actually, nobody should get terribly worried about that, because truth is, as you can see in this chart, you've got America way out ahead, you've got China in good solid second position, and then everybody else is scrabbling around for third position. Poor old broken Britain with Brexit and one of the most corrupt and incompetent and deceitful governments in world history is slipping down the rankings, slipping back into the pack. But there's just a gaggle of other people in third place. So that's one remark about India and the rest of the world in the AI industry. Another interesting thing about the AI industry worldwide at the moment is there's a bit of a paradox. Research into AI has been galloping ahead like nobody's business, but deployment of cutting-edge AI is really restricted to the tech giants. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, in order to deploy deep learning, the type of AI which came to the fore in the 2012 Big Bang, you need huge amounts of compute power, you need massive amounts of data, and you need very expensive, very talented AI experts who are extremely picky. You know, they can afford to be picky, they get very well paid, and they like to work with each other, and where they all are is in the tech giants, so that's where they stay. So there is this paradox that AI is galloping ahead but not really being deployed yet. And GPT technology will probably change this. Because unlike with deep learning, with the GPT systems, you don't need these AI experts, you don't need masses of data, you don't need masses of compute, you simply use the platform that the tech giants give you. So the GPT systems will probably democratize cutting-edge AI. Now, about a third to a half of you have used GPT-4, but the rest haven't, so I'll just quickly explain the kind of thing it can do. So GPT-4 can listen to and record a meeting, either on the phone or in real life. It'll recognize what's been said better than humans will. It'll transcribe it and summarize it for you. And that summary, you can choose how it prioritizes the comments. And you can change it. And you can speak to it and say, oh, actually, I really want to hear what Mr. Anand said. Give me that in full, and dial down what everybody else said. And it will do that. And then you say, actually, no, he didn't say anything interesting, so dial him down as well. You can do that iteratively and verbally. So ChatGPT-4 can also write the first draft of a consultant's report. It can produce a fully functioning website, just given some handwritten scribbled notes. It can produce an analyst report. It can produce a table, given some rough data, produce some charts from that data, and then answer some specific queries so a manager can make some decisions. So it's going to be interesting times for those of us who are knowledge workers, and I think probably that's everybody in the room. Somebody who is CEO of a company offering services to analysts using GPT-4 said to me that he thinks that his clients, the people working for his clients, their work will be sped up by a factor of 10 thanks to GPT. Now, what does that mean? If you have an analyst department of 10 people, does that mean that the bank, the organization that employs them, can get rid of 9 of them? Or does it mean that they'll keep the 10 and they will do much more value-added work and produce 10 times as many really interesting reports? We don't know, and it would probably be somewhere in the middle. This obviously raises the possibility of widespread permanent technological unemployment, which I wrote a lot about in this book. Now, technological unemployment is the result of automation, and automation is not new. We've had automation for a long time. The poster child for it is the agricultural industry, because agriculture used to be every industry. So in America, in 1800, 80% of all workers worked on farms. In 1900, that number was down to 40%, and now it's about 1%. And the grandchildren of those people who used to work on farms are now working in shops and offices and having much better life, actually, working in much more interesting and safer jobs. When that happened, that mechanization, people had to move from the countryside into the city. That was really uncomfortable, and frankly, quite a few people died. But even though all those jobs were taken by machines, mechanized by machines, it wasn't a problem in the long run for humans, because when the machines took our muscle jobs, we had something else to offer. We had our cognitive abilities. That was great for us, wasn't so good for the horse. The horse had fantastic muscle, but nothing else. So in 1915, there were 21.5 million horses working in America, and now there are 2 million. Well, actually, there were just 2 million horses in America. They're not working. So 21.5 down to 2 million, that is spectacular. In fact, if you'll pardon the pun, unbridled technological unemployment. Now, we've got a new type of automation coming. It's no longer just mechanization, it's cognitive automation, and that may well, in fact, I'm pretty sure it will, eventually lead to massive widespread technological unemployment, but not yet. Machines have to get able to do pretty much everything we can do for money in order for that to happen, and that's not here yet. So looking ahead a little bit, I mentioned Moore's law. Because of Moore's law, the smartphone in your pocket, and many of you already know this, the smartphone in your pocket has more compute power in it than NASA had when they sent Neil Armstrong to the moon. And that is true, it is true, but it's out of date. In fact, now, a good toaster has more compute power than NASA had back in 1969. Now, some people say that Moore's law is dead or dying, but it's not true. it's evolving, which is what it's always done. And the result of that evolution is this. Assuming something like Moore's law continues, and there's every reason to believe it will, then in 10 years' time, the machines we have will be 100 times more capable, more powerful than the ones we have today. In 20 years, 10,000 times more powerful. And in 30 years, an incredible 1,000,000 times more powerful. I personally don't want to compete in the workplace with a machine 1,000,000 times more powerful than ChatGPT or GPT-4. But there are lots of commentators who deny that technological unemployment can happen. They say it's the Luddite fallacy. They say automation has not caused lasting unemployment in the past, which is true, because otherwise we'd all be unemployed, and therefore it won't in the future. And that is a really dumb argument, because just because something hasn't happened in the past does not mean it can't happen in the future. If that was true, we wouldn't be able to fly. So I think that to deny the very possibility of technological unemployment is dangerously complacent. And if we get there, we're probably going to need a really different type of economy, and I describe this in some detail in the book. Some people call it the Star Trek economy. It's the economy of abundance. I like to call it fully automated luxury capitalism. But the economic singularity is not the end of the story, because now we get back to our friend, the big red button over there. This is the technological singularity, which will follow the economic singularities after some time. And it's when we create an artificial general intelligence, which is a machine which has all the cognitive abilities of an adult human. So it can do everything we can do and a bit more. And because machines can be improved in ways which we unfortunately can't, it will go on to become a super intelligence. Initially, hundreds of times smarter than Einstein, eventually millions of times smarter than Einstein, which may sound like science fiction. I'm sure a lot of people are sitting there thinking, yeah. But actually, there's two ways of doing this. One is to carry on doing what we're doing, using deep learning, using good old-fashioned AI, and using transformers to continue to make our AI systems better and better, and eventually we get to AGI. The other way of getting to AGI is whole brain simulation. So you take a brain, preferably from somebody who stopped using it, and you map that brain, you map the Y diagram of the brain, and one of these two systems, one of these two approaches, possibly both, will get us to AGI unless there's some magic going on up there. If you believe that, fair enough. I personally don't. And it's interesting that the two most capable AI labs in the world, I call them AGI labs, they are targeting AGI. They're explicitly trying to create AGI. Demis Hassabis, the CEO of DeepMind, thinks that it will happen sometime this century. He won't be drawn on when he thinks it will happen. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, which, as you know, launched ChatGPT and GPT-4, he thinks AGI will come in a decade or so. If and when we create superintelligence, it will be the most important event in human history, and it will either be the best thing or the worst thing ever to happen to us. Because we will become the second smartest species on the planet. And at the moment, chimpanzees are the second smartest species on the planet, and their future is entirely decided by us. There's 500,000 or so of them, there's 8 billion of us, and they have no say in their future. If we decide they live, then they live. If we decide they die, then they die. And they are very lucky, because they don't know about that. Now, if and when we get to superintelligence, what will happen? The Terminator scenario is not, despite what some people would tell you, it's not impossible. The idea of a computer system which wakes up, has a look around, takes a look at us and thinks, yeah, and decides to wipe us out, is not impossible. The problem with the movies is that we survive more than 5 minutes. But we'd have to be really stupid and really unlucky for that to happen. It's more likely, more dangerous that we will suffer a nasty outcome because the AGI, the superintelligence, is indifferent to us. It doesn't hate us, it doesn't love us. It just thinks it's got rather better uses for the atoms that we're made of than we have. Or it decides that it'd be a better world if there was no oxygen in it. So there's pretty uncool possible outcomes, but the upside outcomes are really remarkable. So DeepMind, one of these two AGI labs, has a two-step mission statement for itself and for humanity. Step 1, solve intelligence, create a superintelligence. Step 2, use that to solve everything else. And they really mean everything else. War, poverty, death. Take death, for instance. 150,000 people die every day around the world, and 100,000 other people die basically from aging. Aging causes dementia, heart disease, and cancer. And we know, more or less, what causes aging at a high level. There's about 10 factors that cause aging, but curing them is unbelievably complicated. We really need superintelligence to help us fix that. Now, there's some very cool upsides, there's some very uncool downsides. So what a lot of people very sensibly say is, let's push on the brake for a bit. Let's stop this process until we know how to make sure that the transition to superintelligence is safe. Unfortunately, to do that, we'd have to persuade every single one of the 8 billion people in the world that it was a good idea to stop, and that now is the time to stop, and that we can stop, and that nobody should cheat. Well, good luck getting the South Koreans to do that. Even better luck getting the Brits to do that. So, frankly, I don't think that relinquishment is feasible. We have our finger on that red button, and we're not taking it off. So, to summarize, I do think that digital ability can surpass human intelligence. I think it will happen. Two big questions are remaining: when and will we like it? I used to think, and these are frankly guesswork and that's all you can do, I used to think it's probably about a generation, 25 years until the economic singularity, and then another generation until the technological singularity. Now I'm basically halving those timelines because of GPT-4. I think maybe it's 12 and a half years to economic singularity, so 2035-ish, and another 12 and a half, so late 2040s to AGI, which is not very long. Now, it's always a good idea to put some historical context around things. Oh, sorry, I should just answer my other question, which was, will we like it? When we get to superintelligence, will we like it? We don't know whether an AGI, whether a superintelligence will look at us and think, you're a possible threat, I better get rid of you, or I just don't like you, I better get rid of you, or you're competing with me for some resources. On the whole, I think we're unlikely to be a threat to it, because once it's much cleverer than us, we, like the chimpanzees, can't hurt us, we won't be able to hurt it. And I think we're also unlikely to be competing with it. So my guess is that a superintelligence will actually quite like us, because intelligence craves stimulation. And we are 8 billion, incredibly varied and incredibly inventive and ingenious little entities, which the superintelligence would probably like to have around. And I think our best future is to combine with the superintelligence. So I said, let's have some historical context. A lot of people say that this is the fourth industrial revolution that we're in, and I think that is profoundly wrong. I think we're in something much, much bigger than the fourth industrial revolution. I think we're in the fifth human revolution. The first one, about 1 million years ago, is when we tamed fire and stopped being a completely negligible primate and became quite a powerful predator. And then we had the cognitive revolution 70,000 years ago, when our language developed to the point where we were able to collaborate on sophisticated projects, and then we became the apex predator on the planet. 12,000 years ago, different times, different parts of the world, the agricultural revolution was a miserable thing for individual humans. If you ever get the choice between being a subsistence farmer or being a hunter and gatherer, choose hunter and gatherer. It's much more fun. But for the species point of view, it was great because it means we could create food surpluses and we could specialize. And that led to the creation of cities, and cities are machines for innovation. And that led to the Industrial Revolution. And that gave us mastery over the planet. Maybe that's not such a good thing, but it did. And now I think we are in the early stages of the Information Revolution. It started around about 1960, and this is going to have a much bigger impact than all of the previous episodes. So as I said, I'm optimistic. I don't think we're heading towards dystopia. But I also don't think we're heading towards the opposite of dystopia, which is utopia, for two reasons. Firstly, I don't think the universe is configured to allow perfection. I just don't think it's possible. But also, even if it was, it would be boring, because nothing would change, and so you couldn't have any fun. You couldn't tell a joke. You couldn't take a risk. So I much prefer an idea written about first by a brilliant man called Kevin Kelly, who was one of the founders of Wired magazine. He talks about protopia. And protopia is a world in which everything is really very good. And it just keeps getting better and better. And I think that's stanza from a rather obscure British philosopher called James Allen. Dream lofty dreams, and as you dream, so you shall become. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chase.